Okay, emergency podcast here. We had to bring in Knoll faithful alumnus, Danny Kanell, to help solve the problems of the Seminoles. Danny, people are freaking out in Tallahassee. People are freaking out all over the country, and people are dancing on the Seminoles' grave. I'll give you the floor first. Immediate reaction about the start through the first 2 weeks.
Oh, it's bad. You can't sugarcoat it, Greg. I think I was talking to a couple of my Florida State buddies. There's a text thread going around and asking, when was the last time you felt this sort of, despair, despondency, just agony? Because, and there was some rough losses, like Florida State lost to Jacksonville State not that long ago. I think the thing that hurts the most is the expectation coming into this season was this was a team that could contend for the playoffs. I think even the most realistic Florida State fan was like, I don't know if we can win a national championship, but we can win the ACC again, and we can get that opportunity to play in the playoffs. And man, does that feel a million miles away from where they sit right now at 0-2.
Well, understandably, I don't want to get to the quarterback just yet. We'll get there. But the thing that I find most troubling are the things that they told us were good have not really materialized. Like the offensive line has gotten pushed around a couple times against both Georgia Tech and last night against Boston College. You look at their defensive line, it's supposed to be one of the best in the sport. They're getting mowed off the ball. I think the effort was good. Like the effort was better this week than it was last week, but they were getting moved. So were we being sold a bill of goods, or maybe did this group kind of read their press clippings in the offseason?
Maybe a little bit of both, right? I think because Patrick Payton, I watched him a lot last year, and he was phenomenal, but he had a better supporting cast around him. Maybe he's just a little bit too young in his career to be that alpha that can really dominate a defensive line front that, is showcasing some weaknesses right now. Marvin Jones Jr., another one who came in from Georgia. I think a lot of people said, oh, that's Jeremy Johnson. That was his name, right? Who came in from Georgia the last time and was the transfer. It was like, oh, yeah, he can just step in and fill right in where he left off. And everybody's different. Every class is different. Every transfer portal player is different. And I think there's 100% this class was this defensive front was overrated. I don't think there's anywhere other to do it. They've had flashes, but you're right. And for 2 games now, you've looked at both teams, and this goes across the board, but I do think it kind of the glaring weakness that you thought was going to be a strength was the offensive and defensive lines, where you said that other team had better talent.
Yeah.
And that's probably a thing that I think is the hardest thing to come to grips with Florida State fans and anybody like myself who was high on the Seminoles coming into the season.
Look, there's reason to be high. Like Mike Norvell kind of earned the benefit of the doubt for a while there. Like he's going to fortify the areas that might have been a concern based on the roster and based on his track record in the portal. The quarterback situation, everyone's ripping DJ to shreds. One, I don't think they watched the same game I did against Georgia Tech. I think they cut him loose. They did try to cut him loose last night, but the protection wasn't great, and I still don't think the receivers are very good. So how much of the blame should be on DJ as opposed to the offensive identity and perhaps maybe the supporting cast?
It's a split. This better than anybody. Like the quarterback's always going to catch the most heat. He's going to catch the most strays, and that's what's happening with DJ, which is the absolute worst thing that can happen with a quarterback who mentally struggles with confidence. I think that's very clear. Going back to Clemson, I think that's why Dabo was so positive with his every time he talked to the press. He was like, DJ's our guy, never wavered in his faith. He's doing the right things in practice, always bringing up the good things. I think that was probably the similar situation at Oregon State, but we didn't hear about it because they're not really a nationally covered team. But I think 2 things happened. One, I think DJ thought he was going to go to a place where he would have outstanding support. And I also think Florida State thought they would give him the best situation he's been in his career so you could get the best version of DJ. What I think has happened, it might be the worst version. It might be the worst surrounding cast around him that he's had. And that's a really bad combustible mix because now you're seeing a quarterback who clearly is struggling. I always like to look, I like to break down film. I like to look at technique, but a lot of times I like to look at the eyes. Where is this quarterback's headspace? And he looks like somebody who's lost, who's shaken, who desperately needs somebody to step up and make a play for him. And the worst part about it is, there were at least 5 or 6 drops last night in crucial situations that could have got him some mojo, could have got him some confidence to, okay, the next pass is a little bit easier. Instead, every pass is hard to complete. And when somebody's struggling as much mentally as he is, it's just a recipe for disaster.
I felt like they were always behind the sticks too. Like it was really unfortunate. Like I hate it when quarterbacks shoulder all the blame because I don't think it's all on him. But there were missed throws, and that's what people will point to. Danny does an amazing job alongside Dusty Dvorak on College Sports Network on SiriusXM Channel 84. You can check that out every day. He does an amazing job on the Cover 3 podcast as well. Even though you're never there on Saturdays, you're especially never there on Saturdays when Florida State loses. I don't know why that is. I know you're working in other places, but it's got to be because you're avoiding the heat. Is that what it is?
Yes, I go into hiding. I mean, I didn't know if you know. I didn't even watch the game last night. Like I was like, hey, this episode of American Ninja Warrior is awesome. I was trying to act like I didn't see what was happening because I was getting absolutely roasted. Probably, I mean, most of it's deserved. I can be, I can admit that. But it was ugly. The other thing too, and we've seen this happen in a number of fan bases. It does not do any good to be calling for Brock Glenn, the backup at halftime, to be, roasting your own quarterback. And that is the hardest place to play sometimes. And I'm actually looking forward. It's not going to happen soon because they have the bye week. Then they have Memphis coming to Tallahassee. Sometimes the best thing is to get out of the home crowd where you hear those murmurs, those rumblings. That adds to the pressure that he's already feeling. And we'll see. I mean, we were joking before we came on, like, you said, what can fix it? I said, maybe free agency. Like, can they go out during the season? Is there a trade deadline where you could add somebody? Because clearly they think he's the best option. Did you think they should have benched him? Because I thought in the third quarter there was a minute where you give him a break. Like, let him see somebody else do it. And if Brock Glenn goes out there and moves the chains, and you get some spark of life, then you say, okay. But instead they stuck with him. And I guess the point was that if you bailed on him now, you're bailing on for the season. And I think that's why Mike Norvell stuck with him, because he didn't want to feel like we're throwing in the towel on DJ just yet.
Yeah, I think it's too early at this point. Also, I've seen Brock Glenn. I mean, I think there's this natural assumption that amongst fans that, oh, well, if this guy can't get a gun, the next guy can. Well, there's a million reps that Mike Norvell and his staff have evaluated since DJ got on campus, and they clearly believe that he's the guy that gives them the best chance to be successful. And the second you pull the plug on the guy that gives you the best chance, then you run the risk of not just messing up DJ's confidence, but losing the team. Yeah. So you don't want to lose the team in week 2. So I think that they got to dance with who brung you at this point. And if Brock Glenn had shown us something in his time under center last year or in the shotgun last year, then I'd feel maybe a little differently, but he looked like a deer in headlights at times as well. Before we get you out of here, and I know I really appreciate you I'm just curious, like as a fan, like the fans are beside themselves, understandably. I think they are being treated more negatively than most because of how they handled the playoff situation last year. Other fan bases are really enjoying the team that, quote, complained all off season, starting out 0-2. But how much of the vitriol is because of what happened last year? And how much was there more pressure on this season because of what happened last year? I guess that's kind of where I'm at. It just feels like kind of a convoluted mess, frankly, around it right now.
Oh, it feels like Florida State is the most hated fan base in the country. It definitely feels that way. And I know fans can give it to any fan base, but I think it's a culmination of a lot of things. I think it's how aggressive they were with, being upset about being left out of the playoff. FSU Twitter is very much a thing. And, a lot of it was, publicized when Herbie and Dan Orlovsky and yourself and others were saying they needed extra security. And I do think that's the lunatic fringe, right? Like clearly no one would endorse that, but they were loud. They were obnoxious. And I think that added to it. You know what else I think adds to it is the lawsuit with the ACC. I don't think that helps the situation at all. And I think what you're talking about, I think it adds even more pressure. Like you guys are supposed to be this team that is above the rest in the ACC, that sees themselves as better than everybody else. Well, look, you can't even beat 2 of the middle of the road opponents. Like that's where it all kind of comes together in this perfect storm that the team finds themselves in the center of, and which makes the fans even that much more despondent, that much more willing to, go off and turn on themselves now. Now they're starting to turn on the team. And that's my biggest fear, that because I think this will probably be one of the biggest challenges of Mike Norvell's career is keeping this team together, intact, fighting, because it didn't look great at the end. It looked like they threw in the towel at the end of the Boston College game. That, to me, will be his biggest challenge in this era when you've got so many new players who don't have those deep bonds like I had when I went and was a freshman class. We stayed 4 years together, sometimes 5, and you wanted to bleed next to your guy and you would do anything to protect your teammate. Now these guys have only been on campus for 6 months. How willing are they to stick it out and to fight it out when things are tough? I think that's going to be a really big challenge for Mike Norvell.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Can it be fixed? Like, seriously, I know we joke about like free agency, you got to go get new players. Like that's not happening. Like, is there a silver lining here to feel good about, perhaps, if Florida State can somehow turn it around?
There's no bye week. They can't lose this weekend. I think that's the biggest one. So a win cures a lot of things, right? Boy, I tell you, Memphis, all of a sudden, one of the better teams in the group of 5. You talk about desperation times. They have to run the football. They have to get DJ's confidence up. Like, they need all this thing. And that's why I do think I'm not making an excuse. Like, they could have used this year a Furman, a Citadel, a Chattanooga, some team they could have just gone and imposed their will and really would have been a layup to get some confidence. Instead, they've been faced with adversity right off the bat. They faced 2 kind of new schemes, right? There was a lot of new, like, you don't see an opponent, they're going to throw some new schemes at you. They got burned against Georgia Tech with that. Bill O'Brien had a phenomenal game plan that they didn't adjust to very quickly, but that puts you behind the 8 ball. At least they'll be having some film on this one. And the best part about it is if you're Mike Norvell, you say, hey, we got 2 of our biggest challenges ahead of us in Miami on the road, Clemson at home. Let's go prove it's us against the world. Like, it's us against them. And that's what they're going to have to do. And like you said, DJ's shown some flashes. Like, he's made some throws that were dropped. He clearly has been erratic. But can you get his confidence up with 1 win, then stack it with 2? It's even, I don't even want to say it would start with a win. It has to start with 1 completed pass. Then it's 2 completed passes. Then it's a touchdown. Like, get him some confidence. And if you can get him to believe, maybe we get that version that we saw at Notre Dame as a freshman, or the one against Wake who put up 5 or 6 touchdown passes. Like, that's your hope, but it does feel like wishful thinking right now.
All right, you referenced it already. They're 0-2 right now. Notre Dame, Miami, Clemson. I mean, you still got 3.
SMU's on the road, man.
SMU on the road. Like, you kind of look at it, it's like Memphis is not an easy cakewalk. Like, what do you think their final record's going to be at season's end?
I mean, realistically,
what does success look like, and what does reality look like, I guess, would be my question.
10-2 definitely seems like a pipe dream. And that's what people are selling, right?
And they're 10-2. Hey, man.
I think
that's amazing.
I think 8-4 is you salvaged a season that got off to a horrific start. And if you could somehow beat a Miami or beat a Clemson, and those 2 teams are playing for the ACC championship game, then you feel like you salvaged something that was really sideways. And I think that's probably another thing that Florida State fans and maybe even like the collective are struggling with, because I do think Florida State was aggressive in the portal, and it'll be interesting to see different strategies of different teams, because sometimes you feel like you have a chance. Ole Miss is a great example. They feel like their schedule, their quarterback, Jackson Dart, they went ahead and went all in on the portal and like, this is a year we can do something special. Yeah. Other ones, I think, are taking a little bit more of a passive approach, saying we want to make sure we're building towards something, but we don't want to waste all of our resources in a year when we don't think we can do something special. I think that's one thing that's probably bothering, and there's some regret there from Florida State, funders of, man, did we waste a year financially because we thought we were going to be better than we were? I think that's got to be some serious discussions behind closed doors and reevaluating kind of the strategy moving forward in this new era of having to fund these teams.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Danny, awesome. We appreciate it. Hate that your Seminoles are off to a tough start. You can always check Danny out. I would imagine he's received some phone calls on his show alongside Dusty in the morning on SiriusXM Channel 84. And then you can listen to him on the Cover 3 podcast as well. Danny, awesome. And CBS HQ. I know you wear a million different
hats. You don't have to listen to many.
Well, good luck to your Noles. Hang in there, and hopefully we see some light at the end of the tunnel. Appreciate you, bud.
Appreciate it.